start 30 seconds early. We're now 20 seconds, and go ahead and start with making financial literacy resonate through culturally appropriate materials. My name is Nicole Hood. I am the co-founder and CEO of My First Nest Egg. And so excited to be hosting this webinar today and welcome you in to learn about some stuff that we think is really important and critical in really building a next generation, a culture of financial wellness. My business partner, Annie, and I started My First Nest Egg because we saw a problem. Our kids did not understand money. And what we also knew from our experiences and our jobs are that kids that don't understand money can grow into adults who don't understand money, and all of the negative things and the consequences that come along with that. So we embarked on this amazing journey to empower the next generation with healthy money habits. And along the way, I have been blessed to meet so many incredible people. And I'm excited that they're going to be joining me today in hosting this webinar. And those people are, I'm really excited to introduce Veronica Dangerfield. Veronica has been with Patelco Credit Union for 13 years. She is an award-winning international speaker, published poet, professional comedian, and she's won multiple awards for her national financial health education efforts, including Kuna's Desjardins Financial Education Award. She's a financial cheerleader. She's my own personal cheerleader, but if you get to know Veronica, she's everybody's cheerleader, a passionate advocate of changing financial health behaviors with compassion and humor. So thank you, Veronica, for coming.
It is a privilege and an honor to be here, Nicole. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm so excited. And we also have Laura Suarez. And Laura is the program director for Chicanos por la Causa, Prestamos Women's Business Center. Laura brings 15 years of experience in nonprofit sector with 6 years in economic development field. Her work has focused on leading organizations with economic development lens to support the most marginalized communities. And it's been just a privilege to get to know Laura, and our paths have crossed in so many different ways recently. And so excited to have you. So thanks, Laura, for joining us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited.
Well, let's jump right in to the topic at hand. And when we're talking about being able to really make financial education and literacy resonate, we first have to recognize who out there really needs to have access to this information and who we really need to make efforts to reach. And so when we look at this, we're really talking about inclusion, and we're looking at our unbanked and underbanked communities. And I don't know about you, but some of these stats really affected me, because when I think about 36% of African American households being unbanked or underbanked, and 29% of Hispanic Americans being unbanked and underbanked, for me, that feels like an overwhelming and disproportionate number. And it just says we have work to do. And we're so excited to talk today about some of the things that we can do to help kind of change some of these stats. Veronica, would you tell us a little bit more about your experience and why you think that this is a continuing issue, and maybe start to sneak at what we're going to be talking about?
Absolutely. Products haven't been specifically designed for African American. When we started out, historically, the systems that were created were extremely discriminatory, and there wasn't a welcome mat for us. And it had actually created an environment where we distrusted banks. So there's a lot of good news around that now, especially in the credit union industry. But historically, it has been quite challenging, Nicole.
Mm-hmm. Laura, do you want to speak to this a little bit as well?
Yeah, so some of the things that we get to see, and so just to give a feedback on the Women's Business Center, our space is there to support women entrepreneurs and men, but our focus is women. Some of the things that we get to see, not just with the women that are coming through our doors, but our Latina women that are coming through our doors, is still that because somebody doesn't look like me in a banking institution, it can get very hard because maybe there might be a language barrier, or again, just like Veronica mentioned, there isn't the language that's being used maybe might not resonate with them, and so a lot of them are still having cash on hand and still are using kind of like the mattress method to save money. And are just barely dabbling in the realm of banking. So you can still see that there's a lot of work for us to be done, a lot of work for collaboration available, so that we can start bridging that gap.
Mhm. And I mean, we talk about really why it is so important to why it's really so important to start making ends here, and start making accessibility a bigger focus. And so we were talking about some of the reasons that we see that kind of cause these underbanked or feelings of not being welcome in banking, and language barriers, financial deserts, lack of access to brick and mortar, misconceptions about minimum banking balances. Would you guys speak to this a little bit more and give some examples of what you're seeing, and so we know how we can overcome them?
I have the opportunity to work in Oakland, and in the Coliseum, they have tiny homes for youth that are unsheltered. And I get an opportunity to go there. And because I am there and I make it a point to go there every month, and the kids actually get to know me, I get a chance to talk to them about introduction, bringing a welcome mat into financial awareness through the credit union industry. So right around the Coliseum, there are no banks. There are no grocery stores. It is a financial desert, and it is a food desert. But through the credit union, if once they become a credit union member, they can go to 7-Elevens. And so there's 7-Elevens around. So that gives them a little bit more access. But at the credit union, we also have no minimum fees or no minimum balances, which also is very welcoming to these. But the challenge is they're used to paying fees, and they're used of the lack of access. So support and education is really, really vital to bring these underserved and unbanked back into the fold of financial institutions.
Here in the Valley, I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and so some of the things that we've noticed, and I'll tell you this from just personal experience, coming from a home, we migrated here when we were really young, and being in the area that we were at was predominantly Latino, predominantly Mexican. Spanish, fluent Spanish speakers. And we got to see exactly what Veronica says, things like, maybe there was a payday loan area in maybe a 7-Eleven or like a convenience store. We didn't get to see a lot of banks around us. Again, my dad would cash his check at a little corner store where he'd pay the fee, and he knew like not all his money that he would get after taxes was his, but he still needed to make sure that he could cash that check. And so we didn't grow up in spaces where it felt like they talked to us. So when we talk about language barriers, and I know traditionally, right, we know we are left behind, and so it still feels in 2023 like the institutions are barely maybe making a dent in supporting us, because we come from so many different cultures. I mean, it's not just people that speak Spanish. We're predominantly Latino here in Phoenix, Arizona, but no, there's so many other spaces and so many other cultures that come in that still they don't have people that speak like them or to them in their own language. They don't have people that that look like them, and I had already mentioned that. And so it just feels like, where were we, or why don't we matter? And so that's something that I've been experiencing my whole entire life.
So when we were chatting in putting this together, we were trying to come up with, what is the term? Is it lack of communication? Is it lack of trust? And the feeling on the other side is a feeling of, am I invisible? And so what we look to is, if this is the feeling that certain people are getting when it comes to learning about money, what are their alternatives? And the alternatives really aren't great. And so When we talk about fringe breaking as an alternative, there are payday lenders, auto titles, pawn shops, rent to own, tax refund lenders. And when we're talking about unbanked and underbanked, when we're talking about underbanked, that means that we could have a bank account, but we're also looking to these fringe and kind of, not healthy financial solutions for very real financial issues. Like the money is needed today. So can we just talk about this a little bit? We have a few minutes to kind of get into this before we move on into some of the solutions we recommend.
Well, I don't know if you ladies know this, but there are more check cashing places than Starbucks and McDonald's put together.
Wow.
So the access is there. And because they have there's no intimidation. They can go, they feel comfortable going in, that they get to know the people there, and they have relative comfort in there. Although it is impacting their bottom line, because when you're paying $8 for something that's free, it's cumulative.
Yeah.
So and the reason why these payday loans, and some of them are owned by banks, the fees are just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's very, very easy to get in. It's like the Hotel California. You can get in, but you can never leave. So it really bothers me to the core that that anybody has to use these as a resource. And most of the people who use them don't understand that there's a better way.
Yep.
There's an easier way. So as a credit union leader and somebody in a financial institution, it is our responsibility to bring the welcome mat out.
Yep. Laura?
I think and I think, and if we're not in it, you don't get to see it. But if you pay a little bit more attention, you get to see that there's less banks in communities that maybe are lower moderate income, and more payday loans that are out there. We've been talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, and actually during the pandemic, I spoke and worked with an entrepreneur who used a payday loan in order to have money to be able to pay the rent in her brick and mortar, and to get her out of that like 400% interest rate took us quite some time, but we were able to get her out of it. So these are intentionally placed in spaces and communities where we cannot, either we have misinformation, or the word isn't coming out to us, or we fear people that look nice in suits. And I'm going to say that because that's something that,
Yes.
I know scares my dad. And so and the way they come in and they talk to us, it sometimes feels very scary, and like, that's not for me. And I'm going to say another thing, especially because I am a Latina Mexican. We work in communities that a lot of us don't have a social security number. So we're working with I-10s, and we dare not, maybe go into these financial institutions. So these are just a couple of things that I've experienced in my time working, not just with entrepreneurs, but just community in general.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest disparities I saw, so before starting my first nest egg with Annie, I was a corporate attorney for almost 2 decades. And on one side, I was helping millionaires become billionaires. And then my pro bono service hours, I was going to clinics. And the thing I saw most frequently was someone who had gotten themselves into high interest rate debt. And it had buying a lawnmower for $300, and now it was $900. And if they had a job, they were being debited. They were it was so overwhelming. And then I'd help them negotiate it down, but so much damage had been done by the time they were coming in to get help. And so what it comes down to is really, lack of education. But how do we bring education if we haven't built trust? So I think this was the word that jumped out to all three of us.
Totally. Like, none of us, right? Like, we cannot build a relationship if we do not build trust. Most of us might sometimes lose relationships because maybe a trust was broken, and maybe unintentional, but it was. And so that's, I 100% am with you on that.
The New York Times had an article in 2010, and it was very, very disturbing. It's called a syndrome. It was a syndrome called banking while Black, where African Americans went into financial institutions and asked for transactions, and they were not welcome. Not only were they not welcome, but the police were called. So if you already had an institution where you don't trust, and every time you go in there, you're scared, um, that just cannot exist anymore. So we have to build up institutions that welcome. I call it financial compassion. You have to understand that you can't blame the victim. You need to welcome them in. You have to have products and services that build their financial well-being and their financial health. Second chance checking, how to build credit, and as Laura said, lower the intimidation rate to put a welcome ad out so that all people are respected and loved and embraced in these institutions. What do you think, Nicole?
Well, I think it's really great that what we see is this trust building is so important if we're going to educate. And
Yes.
so when we start to look at this as of coming from banking, coming from entrepreneurship, and now, trying to educate children, I think we've all found ways that we can help build this trust factor because that educational piece is so important. And I think one of the first things we talked about was really understanding and knowing your audience. And so right now we've gotten to, how do we execute? How do we get better at building trust so that we can provide education? And I'm really excited to talk on this point as the entryway. Like, this is the first one. You have to know who you are trying to reach out to. And so can you both maybe talk about this just a little bit, and why truly understanding and knowing your audience is important and not assuming?
I can speak to it in the entrepreneurship world because I deal with it every day. And so when we're talking to entrepreneurs and we're talking to business owners, we're asking, who's your target market and who are you trying to serve? And are you being inclusive, right? So we're working a lot with inclusivity. And so a lot of times they think that it's everybody, or they think that it's a very general or very broad assumption, like everybody can take care of my product, or take advantage of my product or service. But it's not necessarily. There is a character that you build, or this person has different characteristics. And so and I'll give you the example of the Women's Business Center. When we were because we're 2 years old, we just turned 2 early November. And so when we think about who is walking through our doors and what kinds of programs we wanted to exist, I couldn't do it without knowing who was really going to benefit from our services. And so we created surveys, we went out into the community, we did focus groups. We wanted to hear from them because I couldn't sit here and say I knew if I genuinely didn't to the core know who my target audience was. And so when we're looking at like spaces in the financial world, they also have to understand what are they trying to sell and how are they trying to sell it, and who is the people that are going to be coming and walking through those doors, and who do they want walking in through those doors. So for me, this is key to anything that you do in if it's in entrepreneurship world or in the financial world. You have to know really who's going to walk through your doors and take advantage of your services. And once they're there, capture them and absorb as much as you possibly can and squeeze information out of them, because they're the people that are going to be your returning clients.
And within the credit union world, we want to make sure that I remember once upon a time I worked for a credit union, and and when you came in and you applied for an account, a lot of people that were Black and brown weren't meeting the minimum standards. So we had to change what our standards were so that everybody can be welcome. Because sometimes you have an opportunity to you have your middle class, and then you have we call them our struggling, we have our thriving. So we have to have products and services for all of them. And we also have to be in the community. And that's one of the good things about my credit union, Patelco. We're in each of those communities so that there's a representative that understands their culture. And I actually am an ambassador, especially for the unbanked, because I want to make sure that when they go in, that there's a warm handoff, because I think that many of our community members are very fragile.
I think this knowing your audience is just such a critical first step, because so many assumptions can lead you down the wrong path of really being able to provide then all the other things that are important.
Mhm.
Sometimes I've talked to financial institutions, and they're really wanting to engage with a certain, ethnic group, or let's say, Bengali, and they'll say, "Oh, we know that they have Muslim beliefs, and so we know that they practice riba, and so we need to create new products completely that will service this population." Well, without really talking, knowing, surveying their particular population in their area, they may already have products available that work for that community, and it might not need an overhaul, or just the opposite. It might need an overhaul, but you're not going to know until you've actually asked those questions. For us, one of the things that we did in building My First Nest Egg to bring people to our website, we started creating articles. And when we were trying to bring more Hispanic readers to our website, we went out and said, "What are some of the topics you would like to know more about?" And it's when we finally asked those questions. I mean, the difference
Mhm.
in having 3 people read an article and hundreds or thousands of people read an article because they're finding the information that is important to them. I mean, it's not just good for the people who want the information, it's also good for the business in terms of how do we bring people through the door. And so I think knowing your audience is so critical.
Absolutely. Everybody should have access to great financial products
Mhm.
and information that they can relate to.
Yes. The next item, we'd love to say speaking in culture, not just in language. And Laura, what does this mean to you, in speaking in culture and not just in language?
So, and I can give an example to this. A couple of years ago, we were working with the public library system to provide these really awesome entrepreneurship classes in Spanish. And I remember and I can't remember who had created the content, but the content was really high level. And a lot of the times when I would ask questions like, "Do you like any questions? Do you understand?" A lot of people didn't really know, or were shy or didn't want to talk to me. That they genuinely didn't understand the higher level Spanish, I guess, that was being taught. And so one thing we did to remedy that was take back the slides. Again, we figured out who our market was, who our audience was. A lot of the folks that we were coming to these classes were maybe entry level, maybe they had finished sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, but they hadn't even gotten high school education. And this is just for this specific class. And so we had to take back and we redesigned the content and we made it very accessible to them to understand. So, instead of using maybe I'm going to kind of call it a fancy word, we use something that they understood, not just in just because of their education level, but also their culture. So a lot of them were coming from Guatemala, South Mexico, and I think Chile, not Chile, no, El Salvador, sorry. And so we were like, what are the words that they use in these cultures so that we can say, kind of like, and I would throw out a word and they were like,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, so speaking in their language was also really helpful. And I just saw the face, like they completely clicked. They felt more comfortable. And then what happened is they started to build more relationships like between
Mhm.
each other. And then they were more comfortable to say, thank you, because I didn't understand. And and so for me, that's what I mean when we say like speaking culture and not just the language, because we all know Spanish, we all know English, but we may have different backgrounds and grow up with different words, or just again, we're just so different. So again, knowing your audience.
Well, Laura, to piggyback on that, just real briefly, the language of banking sometimes is very um, odd. So I have to make sure that when we talk to people in different communities, that we also break down English in ways that they can understand and it's welcoming.
Yes.
Yes. I remember seeing a billboard recently, and it said, "Your dividends are waiting." And I wondered how many people who were driving by knew what that sign meant. And, if are we speaking for everyone to understand, or people in banking to understand? I love this example of speaking in culture, not just in language, because if you're using Google Translate to speak another language, you are missing about 80%. And it's a great start, but it just does not get you all the way there. So this is one of the flyers that we did for Halloween. And not only did we switch out the words because, toil, bubble, bubble, toil and trouble wasn't going to translate perfectly, but we even switched out the witch for laka laka, so we just wanted it to truly resonate and feel authentic. And that's, I think, a big part of how to bring people and welcome them in, is to say, hey, we really do understand and we're speaking your language, and we know, which really leads to our next one, authentic text to build community. When we talk about authentic text, we're really talking about the way that having something that was written by someone in the community. So not someone writing about the community, but someone from within the community writing about itself, or writing an article or other content. And can you guys talk to the importance of this in building trust and really showing someone that you understand?
I was going to let Laura do, but
Yeah.
the authentic text for us in the credit union world also is, we have certified financial specialists that we allow in the community, and we teach you budgeting, and we teach you credit, and we support your financial health. But when we have these, we offer them to the community free. You don't have to belong to the credit union. And we send text to remind them and to keep them engaged with their financial life. Because it's very easy to start. And what is easy to do is also easy not to do. So that's why having those authentic texts to build community and relationships at the same time.
I think that goes the same with us. When we're creating messaging, when we're creating any workshop or any cohort style, we're looking at how we're conveying the information and if it's going to resonate. Even having one-on-one with with our business advisors, it's listening with the intent to understand and not to speak. And so taking a step back and hearing really what this person is saying, that are their needs, and then maybe what's not being told. Or like when they say read between the lines, because a lot of times we say we need one thing, but what we really need is completely different, and the story is telling you that. So that's for us how I feel like we do that with our Women's Business Center.
I know we are running up on time, but if anyone who can stay with us, there are 2 more points we would love to hit, and that is becoming a welcome mat to financial health. And for us, when we're trying to teach children, obviously we want to also involve families. And so while we're not really, because it's so foundational, because it's so basic, that we're introducing children to money right off the bat, the curriculum itself really doesn't change for us too much. But the way that we draw people in to start that relationship changes based on who we are, what community we're trying to reach. And so all of those things above really become our welcome mat for my first nest egg, whether it's knowing our audience, it's studying them, whether it's speaking in culture, and it's those authentic texts. I think I may have mentioned when we were writing all of our stuff for our Sobremesa program, for our Hispanic language programming, we have people in the Hispanic community writing our articles because we really wanted it to resonate and come from some. And so the welcome is, hey, look, this come in, when we're writing all of our texts, they have that authenticity is our welcome mat. So we always say that is the way that we're pulling people in to then be able to provide them. And so for us, those top 3 things are our trust building exercise, so that we can provide excellent education and have someone really, it starts to resonate. Tell me a little bit about the welcome mats, and tell me a little bit about how you welcome people into learning, Veronica.
I espouse financial compassion, and financial compassion means that and along with Patelco, that we don't judge you. It's non-judgmental, and we'll welcome you. I think that all of us have been in an army that has been defeated by lack of education, lack of trust, and not having the ability to have a fair chance. So with financial compassion, we're not going to judge you. We're going to accept you, all of you. We're going to help you build your financial health, and we're going to accept you just the way you are. I mean, I think everybody's doing the best they can with the ability and the awareness that they have at each time. When you're not educated and you're systematically passed by, it's very, very difficult. But you can bridge the gap with compassion, having products and that are welcoming to help them build credit, to help them fight the oppression of these check cashing places. All of that is very important to letting people know that financial health is also financial justice.
And having someone on your corner and knowing that there's organizations and that there's people that exist in this world to vouch for you, to look out for the best interest in you. And so not everybody's out there, you know, maybe to make a buck, but for us, welcome Matt to Financial Health means having that, holding space for them, being in a place where they know they have someone that can hold their hand in the process so that they can learn as they're going, and that then later they can take themselves on their own path and might need us less, but know that we're always going to be available for them at any step of their phase. So if it's in their personal building credit phase or personal budgeting, all the way to entrepreneurship, you know, running their own business, like we have a place for them within our organization.
Compassion and holding space. And for some reason, both of those things have such a similar feel. I love it. And then, of course, our last point, thank you for everybody who's sticking with us. The last point is access. And, you know, once we've built, you know, I really would say our first four are about the trust building, to welcome someone in, to let them know that this is education for you. And it's truly for your well-being, not for us to make money. And so then that access piece. And I know for us at My First Nest Egg, what we do is we, you know, label our project for financial institutions able to take this as an introduction to digital banking to children in the community. And so, but it doesn't matter unless we're giving them something at the end of the day, right? We have to be offering education at the end of the day. And so that has to be available. And so what we've tried to do is take financial education and boil it down to its basics and make it really bite-sized and age appropriate. And so that for us is access. It's accessibility, it's adaptability, and it's being available to everyone. And so that's what we've tried to do. Tell me what access means to both of you.
Well, for me, access means racial justice. Access means that although historically African Americans, Black people have been oppressed, that as a collective society that we work together to bridge, to make all people feel welcome, have access to mortgage loans, have access to credit, and access means I call it OPM, other people's money, so that you can actually build generational wealth. All of this is vital and critical to the African American community because of the lack of access. So my personal mission, as well as the credit union's personal mission, is to bridge that gap where financial health and financial well-being meets with the right products and services so that Black people achieve racial justice and economic justice.
I love that, Veronica. For me, the first thing that came to mind when you said that, Nicole, was so there was and again, I'm going into entrepreneurship because this is what I've been doing for so long, and so I do a lot of little things. But for us, it was to take a client through the loan process for them to go through and prepare a package that was written and done all in Spanish. And we did the whole translation, we did the whole rewriting, and we explained the entire process, and they got funded. Like, that to me is access. How can we remove barriers? If we can, and have the ability to do it with such, because we're being backed up by these really big nonprofit organizations that literally were founded on injustices, right? Chicanos por la Causa, we were Mexican Americans that were also being segregated and discriminated against here in the state of Arizona. And so we wanted justicia, we wanted, for people to see us and to value us. And so that's what it means. So what can we do as like community to serve you better, so that you don't, like, just because you didn't speak English doesn't mean that you don't have access to that beautiful loan or, a grant that, is out in the community. And for me, that's what it means. And I feel incredibly passionate about that. Like, let's remove barriers. And if we can do it one person at a time, I think we're like moving the needle, hopefully.
Well, this is amazing. Veronica and Laura, thank you so much. I mean, I was just blown away by the content that you all put together. And I just hope it really inspired a lot of the people who were excited to join us and learn a little bit more. For anybody who wants to stay on, we're happy to answer some questions. We have a really interesting question. Integrating ChatGPT, good or dangerous? I'd love to get your 2 cents on this, Veronica and Laura. Anyone who needs to leave, please do so. But if you'd like to stay for some of these questions, we're excited to have you.
We're also on that, like, we're barely going and diving into that space. I think that it could be beneficial for like broader things. I think we can get into a dangerous zone when we start asking for like really specific things to be like done on our behalf, because then plagiarism comes in and whatnot. I mean, there's many factors. But we've been using it to like do outlines of X, Y, and Z. When we're helping entrepreneurs, we're also telling them like, maybe you can use it to think of examples in marketing, because we wear many hats when we're in entrepreneurship. And so we just I don't recommend it off the bat, just because it's still so new to us as well. So it could have a little dangerous like peak in there.
Yeah, I agree, Laura. I'm also, when we're talking about cultural appropriateness, chat doesn't have a soul.
No.
And, I love humans. So I'm cautiously leery about it, but open to the possibilities long term. But I'm still on the fence.
I mean, I definitely see it as a remarkable tool, but at the end of the day, before you post anything or use anything, it still has to go through the lens of a human being to say exactly what Veronica you just said. Is it appropriate, right? And so I think that if use it, great, create. But if you're not putting it through another lens of a person telling you if it's something especially outside of what your culture is, there is a big risk of failure. So yes, a tool, but boy, you better be careful. And then someone left a really nice comment that they've saved money just due to education, and it's getting them through right now where they're currently job searching. And that education piece is so important. So thank you to everyone. We will be providing some of our contact information. Veronica and Laura, thank you so much for joining this webinar today and sharing your expertise and everything else with us. And I am just so honored to have you both as friends and colleagues in financial well-being. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
It is a pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Laura. I love you talking. I love listening to you, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we will stop the share. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.